work really well is going away soon. So who even knows? Who even knows anymore? Hey, Anthony.
Hello. Okay, let's see if we can actually get some light on me. Hi, guys.
Hey. Well, for whatever reason, my camera's not working, even though the light's on. And when I went into Chrome, so we're stuck with me being the logo, which is absolutely great. And
never looked better.
Great, fantastic. And because we're not using YouTube's new setup, which maybe would work better, we'll have to investigate. What we're going to do is we're going to use the Office Hours Slack as the chat room, the public chat room. So I'm going to drop into the Anthony. You might want to watch out. You're rustling around a lot. So you can do that.
Yeah, I know.
Mute. Yeah.
Sorry.
Just pop mute when you do it. Otherwise, I can have control for that actually if I need to. So, yeah, there you go. Where are we? So we're gonna drop into. I'm gonna drop into general and just be like, "Hi, everybody. YouTube is being a pain, so we're going to use." Office Hours for the chat, for the live stream. Look for the link. The link is above. And of course, we have no idea if anyone's watching or whatnot, but we're just going to go ahead and plow right through as if it was. So I'm going to drop that in the Office Hours stream link. Comment here, and yeah, I'll keep one eye on the Slack at all times. That'll be great. We're just gonna hack this together. One of these days we'll have it right. Okay, so that's all wonderful and boring. Galaxy's Edge. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, for the 5 people who are watching this who don't know what it is, welcome to Earth. Drink the water. For the rest of us, we've all been to GE, and I kind of wanted to get everyone's takes on it. Kara couldn't be with us tonight because she's in Santa Fe at Meow Wolf, and she kind of, from what I know from all of us, she had kind of the bumpiest experience. But who would like to? Oh, and I just realized I can't show off my lightsaber. This is really sad. It's sitting right here, and I was going to show it to you guys. I'm like waving in front of the camera right now. Boy,
I can show mine off too if you want.
Yeah, well, no, because I can't show off mine. Put that thing away.
Just let yourself lightsaber, Anthony.
So
yeah, I was seriously thinking about that.
Yeah. So actually, you know what? Let's start with Brian, because Brian is sort of our unofficial theme park correspondent, and you're probably the biggest theme park aficionado out of all of us. So I kind of wanted to pivot to you first, since I'm probably our resident biggest Star Wars nerd. But let's start from the theme park perspective. How was your run on Galaxy's Edge?
So I think I went into it, at least if you talked to me, 6 months ago, I had somewhat measured expectations. Given all of the hype, it was pretty difficult to live up to. And I think that when I finally did experience it, and admittedly I experienced it about a month after it opened, so some of the kinks had probably been worked out operationally, and I didn't experience it during the reservation period, but it exceeded my expectations pretty widely for an early opening theme park land, based on a property that I was already pretty pumped for. I think that they did a pretty solid job interpreting the world, but making something unique, something that wasn't just a carbon copy of something out of the movies, whether they be the new movies or the classic movies, which is more of what we've been seeing elsewhere. If you look to other areas in Disneyland or some of the stuff that Universal has been putting out, I think a lot of it's been carbon copy of places that you want to see from the movies or the books. And this was a pretty impressive way to interpret Star Wars while still being its own thing, and giving you that opportunity to explore something new. It also kind of upended a lot of things that people expect from a theme park. I mean, you've got characters wandering around, interacting. It's not just lining up and getting your autograph and moving on. It's really a more lived-in world than I was really expecting when the whole thing was initially announced. So yeah, my first impression was pretty solid, and I think a lot of that has to do with some of the crowds that we're seeing. I mean, I think if it was wall-to-wall people, it would be a lot harder to feel immersed. But being able to kind of roam freely and have a couple of really kind of personal moments really makes it stand out from a lot of what is available in theme parks nowadays.
Yeah, there's kind of this funny thing going on with sort of the online discourse, is that people are pointing to, oh, the lines aren't that long and there aren't that many people there, and they're going abject failure. And we know from the reservation period that there were times when it was just straight up crowded. Maybe Kevin, maybe you could talk to your experience during reservation. Like, what were the crowds like then?
So actually, I had the 8 o'clock slot, the 8 p.m. slot on a Sunday. So it was really crowded where like they have you line up kind of along, I guess, the Alliance, where you enter on the Alliance side, or no, not the Alliance now, whatever it is.
The
Resistance. Yeah.
Over in Critter Country. You get lined up in Critter Country where you go through the Resistance side, because there's nothing in that side right now, because the Rise of Resistance line ride isn't open yet, right? So this is only like one of the 2 rides is open right now.
So there were a lot of people in that kind of shoot, and then by the time actually everybody made it into the land, it didn't feel that crowded. It felt pretty empty kind of once people really started to spread out, which was really interesting because it kind of gave it a weird vibe, especially kind of late at night. It was like a kind of a city shutting down, that it wasn't that crowded. So it was actually kind of interesting to see not that many people. And I mean, I was able to get on the ride, Millennium Falcon ride, like 3 times, with the longest wait being like a 25-minute wait, and just down from there. I didn't make it in the cantina. I was like too far back. And then, so that like everybody rushes over there, but the land itself didn't feel overly crowded. It felt kind of like comfortable.
Yeah, it feels like they kept on like tweaking things, because I think we know there were some days when it was totally crowded. There were other days during the reservation period, there's people who like, oh, we couldn't buy the lightsaber, we couldn't go to the cantina, but we got on the ride, and sort of kind of throwing their hands up in the air because they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. And then I know that Anthony, when you and I went on your birthday, the app registration was in effect.
Yeah.
So you just made reservations on the app like while we were at rope drop. Like we got there early. We were like, we're not going to get to do anything if we don't go there right when park opens. And we're nervous as we watched like all the Mickey mornings or whatever they're called, Magic Hour, whatever it's called.
Mornings, yeah.
Magic mornings, all the Magic mornings, people being let in. And I'm sitting there going like, all those people that are going to get in the cantina and we're not. And just like really just driving me up the wall. And then we got in and like we're standing there at rope drop and we booked, lightsabers, and
like, as you walked in,
it was just like, oh, done, easy enough, finished. And then just spent the rest of the time kind of hanging out. And I mean, it's fun to hang out in,
It's a great place to hang out. Yeah. It's almost designed for that. Like like you were saying, like Kevin, like everybody just kind of disperses when you first, when you first, after you get in, and there's spaces that are made just to sit, and not in the same way that Disney usually does it. It's like there's corners that are like hidden that, that are kind of, just make it magical. Just, like you say, make it lived and make it, make it a real place. Makes it a real place.
Yeah, despite having just the one ride open, you can spend a ton of time there and not feel like you are missing out on anything. Like the experience is the land itself more so than almost anywhere else.
Yeah,
in the park.
Like it starts to feel like, I mean, someone was describing me like the way they used to design things. Like they would like build their God, see, this is really annoying. Like I'm gesturing with my hands. I'm talking with my hands. It's like it's useless. So I just gotta go to like podcast mode alone. Ugh. They'd build a model and take a little periscope and look down into the model to like get the sight lines. And it really feels like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some like VR CAD stuff going on, because you find yourself standing in a line and looking around, and just everywhere you look, it's the spot. Like there's no place that isn't out of world. There's like a couple of places where you can see Big Thunder Mountain's like top, but Big Thunder Mountain's top kind of meshes with the way the land works.
Yeah, they even painted one of the spires in Galaxy's Edge the color of Big Thunder Mountain so that it was more seamless in when you do see that through the sightlines.
Yeah. And there's one spot, if you're like on the second floor of the queue for the Millennium Falcon, where you can look out, and if you're at kid height or you duck down, you can see the top of the Disney Princess Pavilion, which probably one day will be obscured by trees. But other than that, you're in. When it's nighttime and the fireworks are going off, you do not get the firework music. It just feels like it's a hermetically sealed part of the park.
Which is interesting, because a lot of the conversation early on was, does this belong in Disneyland? Or, I mean, out in Florida, they're opening it in their Studios park, which is a little bit more of a mixed bag, whereas Disneyland has always been this kind of hermetically sealed, place. They built Critter Country, they built Toontown, but this is the largest expansion that we've seen in quite a while, and a lot of people were worried that it was going to, myself included, it was going to fundamentally change that character. And I mean, when you're in Disneyland, you don't notice it, and when you're in Galaxy's Edge, you don't feel like you're in Disneyland. You feel like you're in something completely independent and separate. I think they pulled that off relatively well.
And I think kind of along that line, it's actually walking out of Galaxy's Edge back into Disneyland is a very strange feeling. It feels like you're kind of back in another, or like you've come from back off world. Like it's like this normal thing, and it's like, whoa, this is really weird, because you have, like, especially if you're in there for a few hours, it takes on its own life, and then you kind of walk back out into the normal park, and it's just kind of this strange feeling for a second as you like reacclimate to Disneyland and the theme park versus kind of the world that they built over in Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, Anthony, you remarked on that when we came out of GE and went and got a corn dog.
Yeah, it's like back in the days when I was like hardcore LARPing out in the woods. It was like, it's that same disconnect when you've been in a world for so long, and then you come back and it's like, oh, the colors are kind of odd, and like the world doesn't feel the same, the sounds aren't the same, the smells aren't the same. I mean, even for me, like, and I briefly mentioned it, I went off on it. Like Noah's like, go to the bathroom. I was like, we have to go to the bathroom, and he's like, just pay attention when you go to the bathroom. The thing about Disney, and like, I've been a Disneyland lover for forever. When you go in the bathroom,
you worked at the park at one point.
Yeah, I worked at the park for 5 years, and it's one of those weird things where like you go to the bathroom, it takes you out of the theming. Almost, like you go pick a land in Disneyland. Like even if it's themed for Frontier thing, it's a Disney bathroom. You go to the bathroom on Batuu, you're still in Batuu, and it's so seamless in such a way that if you are in character, if you are trying to immerse yourself, if you are, playing along with the world, you could literally, next time I go in, I'm going to scan things. I'm going to see if I can scan stuff in the bathroom. I know it's ridiculous, but in your brain, it's like, it's there. It should be there. Like the bathroom is a living part of life.
You're not going to try to use the app in the bathroom. Like, they will throw you out for that.
Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe I don't know. I've been in the stall, so for all I know, maybe like a crate scan in the stall. But
don't try and crate
not
scan the toilet.
but
someone's got to try it.
Yeah.
And he's going to take one on the team.
Oh God. I mean, for me, what was interesting was, Catherine is annotating the conversation in office hours. Disney does use VR to model out the sightlines. It was in the TechCrunch article. So there's a link to the TechCrunch article there. Catherine, who's watching, the only person probably watching. So that experience of going out into like, the main park, and I hate to say this, but the main part felt like kind of flat, right? Like the way that like Disney feels magical compared to the real world, like it's like Galaxy's Edge feels like that next step farther down the rabbit hole. It's not even the way that, California Adventure feels different from Disneyland proper, or my vague memories of Epcot, or the old, I, I automatically call it MGM Studios, even though it's not MGM Studios anymore. Like that's how old I am. The way those felt like, attempts to have other gates, and the way the first version of California Adventure, kind of didn't know what it wanted to be, and then found its identity, and then lost its identity again as they like, Pixarize the whole thing and Marvelize it. This feels categorically different, almost in a way like Disneyland feels like it's a 2D platformer, and this feels like it's a 3D FPS, right? Like there's an added level of depth. And
it calls out flaws elsewhere in the parks by just existing. Like by walking through there, experiencing what's possible, you start to notice some of the less immersive, the more intrusive elements of other parts of the park.
Yeah. Almost to a point where it's like you find yourself sometimes, say with like video games, like looking at like the 4K or the HD remaster of something. And I mean, they're doing that right now with Final Fantasy VII, right? Like they're doing this massive remaster project that people have been demanding for years, but they've decided to fundamentally change the game. Like they're adding in all this. They're basically making a special edition. And, I don't really want the special edition of Disneyland. I don't want the current generation. I don't want to, live in the world of Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom. And they're like, oh, hey, guess what? We've turned the Haunted Mansion into a holodeck. Like I specifically do not want that. But there's something about that extra depth that shows, I guess I want them to do more like this, right?
Well,
like I wish they had more space.
Because it did feel like it could be its own park in a way that like some of the other lands don't. Or even if you take Harry Potter World at Universal, there's such different beasts. Like that one, it can barely support like a couple of hours in there. At Galaxy's Edge, you can just hang out and do nothing, and it's fun.
Yeah,
and it felt like they could have been a whole park on its own if they'd kind of riffed on that idea. I mean, we're taking forever to build and so much more money, but
yeah. I mean, it's too small. I mean, that was something Anthony and I were talking about, like going in. It's like it could have been its own gate, but like it's like almost like one day, like from the ground up, there'll be some park that they do that will be at this level, but. That day's when we're like septuagenarians or something like that. Like it's taken so long to get this far. And when everyone was like, oh, why is it on Disney and not at California? Like my favorite thing is watch people go like, this should have been in California Adventure. And they go like, where? On like Harbor Boulevard? Like, like you'd have to like start, taking out parts of Anaheim, bye-bye Convention Center. There's just nowhere physical to put it. Which is of course, one of the major problems that Disney has when it comes to Orange County. There's
have a parcel of land somewhere. It wouldn't be connected, but they do own some plot somewhere where they could, theoretically bus people to. It wouldn't be the same situation where you could like walk across the Esplanade, but if they wanted to open a third gate, they theoretically could, but it would be more complicated.
Yeah. And odds are one day that'll happen. It probably just requires them to buy like 6 or 7 more major IPs, but I think they've run out of IPs to buy, right? Like
they own them all.
They already own half the IP that's in other people's parks. Like they've got nowhere to go.
Star Trek coming in 2040.
Yeah. They'll buy Warner's, Warner HBO Max fails, they just buy Warner's, they get all the DC characters. I'm one day it'll probably happen. But the business stuff is the business stuff, but just, I guess, has anyone, so Brian, maybe you followed kind of like the rumor mill on it maybe closer than we did because of your ear to the ground on the theme park stuff. So do you know like what's sort of missing from what was promised, as it were? I think I know a couple of things that were sort of missing, other than Rise, obviously.
I think Rise will hopefully open someday. But I think the big thing was there was a stage show planned, which what I understand is now going to end up in the, I don't think we're supposed to call it a hotel, but the hotel, I think is going to get that stage show eventually. But that didn't materialize. But a lot of the concept art ultimately looks pretty similar. I think there's also space behind Oga's to open a restaurant, like a sit-down restaurant, that I imagine is going to come down the pike eventually. Those are the big things I think that were expected and didn't materialize.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole layer of, I think a lot of us were expecting, and they may still get there, that there was going to be something that was similar to Knott's Ghost Town Alive. For those who don't know, that's sort of a kind of a fetch quest based immersive theater piece, honestly, that unfolds over the course of the day, where you're, running little things for characters and having little interactions, and the characters are interacting with each other, and there's spaces in Galaxy's Edge that feel like they're ideal for that. Like it's pretty clear that the spot over the garage and some of the area there where the stormtroopers kind of patrol, and I've even seen it in articles where it said this is where V the spy has her stage show, and I'm like, really? Like and so that was still going into press material like relatively recently. And there's also
they do have some kind of like mini little stunt show that takes place there.
Oh, it does? Did you get to see it?
No, I didn't see it. I saw a clip on YouTube because it's like
it's like a Kylo Ren thing that he does over by his ship on that platform over there.
No, there's actually a thing with like where Chewie shows up and there's the V character and they're kind of running around over that garage space, and there's like a little like mini stunt show that happens there. If you dig it up on YouTube, it's actually kind of interesting.
Oh, cool.
I don't know how frequently it takes place or whether it's still going or that was just kind of like an opening couple weekends thing, but there's something there.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, the funny thing is what I haven't done is I haven't gone into the Discord for this. I haven't gone and looked at the spreadsheets. Like there's folks, even folks we know, who are like making meticulous spreadsheets of like, all of what the kyber crystals do, or like cataloging, every little bit of the app game and like how it does, and how to work it and how to play it through. And I've got like an allergic reaction to that. Not to the app game, not to the kyber crystals, far from it. I want to discover this stuff in world, right? Like I don't want to read the Prima guide to Galaxy's Edge and learn all the strategies and tactics. I want to just wander around there and discover the stuff. But it is kind of like, oh, hey, when does Kylo show up and how long is this loop? Because I think I saw that Kylo Ren arrival thing twice. I think it might even like loop every 4 hours or something like that, which would kind of go hand in hand when they were handing out the wristbands. But like you don't know in a conventional theme park, you'd know like, oh, V's stunt show is at 3:30. So if you want to catch the stunt show, make sure to be there at 3:30. And there's nothing like that here. No sense of that, and that's kind of great.
Yeah. It's a mix though, because you want to know enough that you don't miss out on things. Like I wouldn't want to show up completely blind and then 2:00 in the afternoon wander up to Oga's and say, hi, how do I get in? Like they've got to find a balance of the discovery, but also whatever planning needs to go into actually getting to experience things.
Yeah, because like the way that I got my lightsaber will probably like never happen again. I was there during one of the like cast crew preview days. I got lucky. Someone tagged me in, and I didn't know where Savvy's was.
Right.
And I asked a shopkeeper, and they were like, cause I just bluntly asked, so where do you get a lightsaber? Like, oh, we don't use that word. And you're looking for salvage. I'm like, oh, okay. Where can I find some salvage? And then they, said, you go past this and around the corner here and down these stairs, right? The way like, someone would really describe it. And that was fantastic. The person who I was with like totally knew where it was, but he was like letting me like run around and like make a fool of myself, which is great because that's what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, of course, you gotta get on the app first thing in the morning, and you gotta make your reservation, or you've got no chance in heck of doing a walk. I mean, not no chance in heck. There are people doing walk-ups. Like we went. Anthony got his, and people were doing walk-ups right then and there. But there is this kind of funny balance between letting yourself relax into the fiction and the sheer operational side of things.
Right.
Yeah. Because I know like I kind of dashed off to try and get into the cantina at first. I didn't really like take in the park, and I kind of regretted it later. I was like, oh, I shouldn't have cared about the cantina reservation that much. I should have just like cared about like walking in, because it's a cool like moment as you're like let into the land and really like soak it in. So it's kind of there's that weird kind of dichotomy at play of like, oh, I want to do these things, but also you're kind of trying to stay in the theming and the moment.
Yeah, and so much of what it's doing is trying to support that staying in the moment. Like the details are doing such a heavy lift.
I tried. I mean, Noah's with me. Like we walked in, and he goes, "Turn around." And, like I look over, and there's like an A-wing. I literally just like, grown 45-year-old man like weeping over an A-wing fighter. But that's kind of, I think, what they're aiming for. I mean, like it's for little kids as well as big kids. Like you look around, and I don't remember seeing anybody frowning. I don't know if you never know. Like I saw smiles on everybody. Like people were generally like nerding out in like the best way possible. Like from the kids to the oldest people. And I mean, we saw one kid who was like totally going to go toe to toe with Kylo Ren.
Oh my God, yeah. There's one little would-be Padawan, and like he was intense. He was intense. It was trying to like square up with Kylo Ren.
That's part of the things people have been saying is that there's nothing for kids there, and I think that is exactly the proof that that's not true. There's no spinner ride, which I don't think anyone is calling for, but the interactions are what the kids are going to go for. That ability to follow Rey or fight Kylo Ren, that kind of stuff. They're going to eat that up way more than sitting in the spaceship going in circles.
Yeah, 100%. Because like when I was walking in, the huge crowd that was coming in was moving forward kind of into the park, and then so we passed Chewie and kind of walked past him, and then as I was kind of rushing through, there was like a girl with the V character, and V was like, oh, we got to find Chewie, like, and leading her through the crowd. And I was like, oh, that was just a really cool moment to kind of see as she was like, I passed Chewie, and then here's these people looking for Chewie. And I was a little kid, and that's probably like the first like immersive experience that kids had, and that's just a really cool thing to probably experience at that age. It's like, oh, you're part of this, like you're part of Star Wars, like it's really cool.
Yeah, and the performers who are up in there, they seem to be really digging on being able to do that kind of stuff, and you provide those moments where people are kind of playing along with the participants. And it was sort of funny where you were walking along, and like we heard the immersive word coming out of like the mouths of like teenagers and middle-aged folks alike. Like, I mean, granted, it was like second day of full public opening, but I think there was there was this awareness that there was kind of something else going on here. And, it was just kind of funny to just like watch like kind of Rey just walking around, and sometimes people would approach her, but other times people wouldn't. They were just like, oh, she's up to something, like she's going about her day. But you might also just like find yourself having a conversation with one of the shopkeepers who's, they've come up with a whole narrative for themselves. They've been given that opportunity to kind of populate the world.
You can walk up to any person apparently there and say, "What's your story?" and they've got one ready.
Yeah. And you just start to wonder, if even more resources were dedicated towards making that part of what they were doing, just kind of where it would go. I mean, they've built an amazing platform for play, like whether it's, an immersive theater thing or a LARPing thing. I don't think there's a more elaborate space for that kind of work in existence right now than this park. Granted, there's Evermore Park, which I haven't been to yet, which is expressly being built for that kind of experience. And the whole point is playing the game. And at some point we'll get over there and check that out and do some runs. But right now, when it comes to what's forward facing out to the world, I think that was the number one thing I was kind of nervous about, with its arrival wasn't that, people are like not enjoying the franchise anymore, or, it's not going to get Star Wars right. Cause I knew they're going to get Star Wars right. I didn't realize how right they were going to get Star Wars. Like they really got it right.
Mm-hmm.
But just this fear that it was going to be cheesy, that it was going to be kind of pointing at the qualities of immersion that we value, and not actually managing to execute on it at all. And there's a hell of a lot more that could be going on in that direction, but it feels like the compass is pointing that way. Let's talk a bit about the app. Has everyone got a chance to screw around with the interactives?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyone got a strong vibe, a strong take? Did anyone spend a lot of time with it? Like, kind of Anthony and I dickered around with it, but I don't know if we.
So, I didn't spend I guess I spent a good amount of time with it because there weren't a lot of characters out at that kind of like 8 o'clock session. Like Ray was kind of roaming around, Chewie was hanging out doing stuff. But so there weren't a lot of characters, and I didn't get into the cantina, didn't the lightsaber. So a lot of it was kind of exploring the land and kind of fiddling around with the app. And I actually went on Father's Day, so with my dad, and then my mom was there as well. But my dad was like kind of getting into the app as I was like really kind of fiddling around with it. But he was like kind of getting into it too, in terms of like, because you can make things happen. Like there's the one thing with the thing from the trash compactor that you can kind of bring down. But I think if you fiddle around with, like the ships, you can bring them, like they come online, they react, and like if Chewie's standing by it, he'll react once the ship reacts to you playing around on the thing. And there just kind of feels like a lot to do, and I feel like it could do more. But I think that's kind of going to be their key to creating some of those more organic moments. They don't have those characters of the fetch quest that you mentioned at Ghost Town Live, but they do have the app, and it's got a really strong base. And kind of like I'm curious to see how it evolves, because it seems like kind of the anchor to kind of getting people moving around the land and trying to do different things and like playing around with it. And there's a lot to. It does feel like there's quite a bit to do there, and you can like you earn things, you earn credits, you earn stuff for your avatar that doesn't like show up. And I don't know that the character, like you can do anything with those credits in world, but the potential is there, and it seems like there's a lot they can do with it going forward.
Well, I just got a survey from them from when we went, and one of the questions on the survey actually was, if you could use the apps, use the credits that you earn in the app to buy, like exclusive specific stuff that you can only buy with credits, would you do it? And I was like, yes. I mean, like, who wouldn't want to get something specific that you can only earn if you're playing the stuff in world? So
oh god, I think they found more ways to take money from me. God damn it.
Yeah, I mean, it's more money, but at the same time, it's a great. I mean, it's from a business standpoint and from an immersive standpoint, it's brilliant, because you're making a way to get cash value, entertainment value that keeps bringing you back into the world. It keeps you interacting with the app, keeps you interacting around the world, and keeps you exploring. They could literally add things and take things out. I'm sure they've built it in, because just by exploring around and just digging around the app, there's still more stuff that I know people who spent the whole day there, and like us, and people who spent a couple hours. Nobody's found everything yet. Nobody's earned everything yet. and and they just did an update for Disney Play that specifically targeted the battery issues. So they're thinking about it. They're thinking about how people are interacting with the land, how people are interacting with the app, and that's really exciting to know that they are working on it and making it move forward. I'm curious, if we start getting transmissions when you're at home, because it may be a thing. How do you keep moving it forward like that? It's kind of cool.
Brian, you think we've got a couple of things to say?
I was going to say, I think the main motivation for me to get on the app was for the park interaction and for the learning. I don't know exactly where the tech is, but just by being on the app, like the ride remembered me when I went back through. Like you get to the pre-show for the ride, and by whatever interaction I did, and I don't know what it was, I don't know how it knew, but it knew that the first time I went on the ride, I did a pretty bad job. And so Hondo said, "Oh, you're back. Don't, screw it up like last time." And that kind of, interaction, the fact that a theme park ride remembered me was something that, stuck out and made me much more motivated to get on that app for the rest of my time there.
Yeah, like Brian Bishop told me that he had a similar thing happen to him, which now makes me want to go back and deliberately crash the Falcon and then and then go back through just to go, oh, and that was, so that's actually, Anthony and I had an interesting experience that, we went on the Falcon and it broke down right as we were coming in for a landing. Right, like we were actually, back inside the spaceport landing, and then just, and it was glorious because it meant we got 10 minutes. I think we were in there for a while. 10 minutes in the best selfie palace in America, unsupervised. We just couldn't get our seatbelts off. I wasn't about to try because I'd be scared of what they would do. You took your seatbelt off, banned for life. No. But my goodness, and we were stuck in there for a while, and at a certain point the video loop started vamping. Hondo came on and said, this is what we call a major malfunction, and just started riffing. And I was kind of blown away that they decided to, oh yeah, if this is going to happen, we want to give them something to stay entertained and probably stay calm, make it all feel like, oh, this is perfectly natural and perfectly normal. And who knows how many times a day it's going to happen. But also just to that, it gets back to that level of attention to detail. All the buttons and switches still kept on making noises while we were stuck in there, waiting for the thing to cycle through and let us out. And then of course they did what they always do when something goes wrong. They make it up to you, so they just shoved us right back in. So we got to ride it twice in a row, back to back, and it was just yes, this is fantastic. And just that type of micro level planning that they're doing here really shows me that there's just a lot of care going into all the details, and kind of wondering what's going to happen when Rise is open and sort of the full story of the land is in action, right? Because I think Rise is a real critical part of that. I've heard some things about the prequel novel, that literally the prequel novel kind of leads you right up to the moment in the story where the park is set. And that's another kind of funny thing about it, is this land is currently set in a very specific time period. And that very specific time period is right between the last movie and the movie we're about to get. And I gotta admit, that feels like a weird narrative gamble on their part. Is it going to feel, I was talking about this with someone last night, is it going to feel like once Rise of Skywalker is out, will it feel like we're traveling into the past? Right? Right now when we're there, we're, in the present of Star Wars, very much the present. But as soon as December clears through, right, they're not going to rework Rise of the Resistance to make up for the fact that Rise of Skywalker's happened, that story's over now, et cetera, et cetera. Everything they've done is predicated on this moment in time.
which is interesting considering that Rise is so delayed. I mean, we may get the movie before we actually get Rise.
Oh, that'd be kind of rough. I don't want I don't want that to happen. I want to experience the story chronologically.
Indeed.
Because that's the kind of Star Wars nerd I am.
But that doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's a unique situation for this park because it's so immersive, but pretty much any theme park ride based on intellectual property exists at some point. Even, I mean, the original Star Tours theoretically exists at a point in Star Wars that is now past. And it doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, I can't buy it. Darth Vader's not around anymore. How is he here?
Yeah.
But it ultimately depends on what happens. I mean, if there's a huge shift in what the characters are doing, it might feel a little bit strange to then be interacting with Kylo Ren and Rey if you know the narrative turns in such a way that becomes uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean that's why I think it's like a kind of an interesting gamble, you know. Like and weirdly enough, something that when they first announced it, you know, I remember one of the lines being like, it was coming out of one of the D23, I think, sessions, and I was like, this is a land that, like, you know, like the hero characters haven't been to. Like this is far away. It's at the edge of the galaxy. Like it's far away from the major conflicts. You know, like you're not going to be, you know, dealing with that stuff and with those people. And then, you know, lo and behold, what we get is just, you know, boom. It's right smack dab in the middle of the action. It's right smack dab in the middle of the story. Now they've also written Batuu into a bunch of other material. So, you know, with a few flips of switches and some changes of coats of paint, you could easily just be like, oh, this is happening at this period of time instead, and like unleash different characters in the park. Specifically, there's the Thrawn Alliances book, which takes place on Batuu, partially on Batuu, both in the Rise of the Empire period and during the Clone Wars. So you can just cycle, you know, Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker and Grand Admiral Thrawn into there and just cycle everybody else out. If they wanted to do that, you know, you have to change the radar dish on the Millennium Falcon. Like there'd be ways to tweak it if they wanted to, but those rides are tied to narrative. I mean, the Falcon could be easier to fix, but who knows what Rise is like? So it's hard to say, but it is called Rise of the Resistance.
And that's also part of the strength of the land. I mean, if they were to do that and then leave the ride the way it is, I mean, part of the strength is that everything in that park fits that specific story, as opposed to, you know, you walk into Frontierland or Tomorrowland and there's, you know, Monsters Inc. and you know, individual good things in these parks, but Rise of the Resistance exists as part of that story. The Millennium Falcon exists as part of that story. Any change to that, even if you make cosmetic changes outside of that, changes that entirely.
Yeah. You know, and that's such an interesting choice to make, as opposed to something that might have been a little bit more generic, and that would have, you know, had some narrative flexibility. I mean, I think part of it comes down to, like, you know, how popular is the next movie, right? And that'll sort of define how popular this trilogy is. And then, you know, if it's mega popular, then they'll be able to eat off, you know, this period of time and the stories for, you know, 20, 30 years. That's something that could be. So hold on. Seg's got there's some notes in here from Seg. So in the chat, recurrent movie characters, they all seem to be all walkabout characters, can be swapped to other characters and not affixed to the architecture. Brian, you came through principles, video swap. So yeah, I mean, I think there, until we're like physically in Rise, we won't actually know like how much those assets are going to be hard to swap out, right? Like, I mean, the nice thing is like a first order base and a Imperial base just require, you know, change a couple of logos and you're good to go, right? I mean, that's always been one of the advantages of how old Star Wars is, right? Like everything feels like it's been there forever. And there's only a few things in terms of, I'd almost say like there's some sharper angles in the First Order aesthetic, a combination of sharper angles and softer curves, right? Like everything's sort of more extreme in terms of the aesthetic. But beyond that, it's fairly simple to swap out the vibe from one thing to the other. What else sort of struck you guys? What
Can we talk about the lack of music?
Let's.
I think that's one of the more interesting elements. I think it's such a like. There's nothing physically kinetic in the build outside of the characters, but the sound mixing creates this sense of activity and movement in that space that I think is unique in pretty much any theme park I've been to.
Anthony, remember what like happened at breakfast? And we were like, what?
Oh, yeah. So just like you said, going back to the sound mix, like we were sitting at having breakfast and we are just kind of chilling, and then we hear this roaring rumble of a starship taking off, and they've got subwoofers everywhere. It's like the seats rumbled, the seats rumbled, and we turn around, we're looking like, what? Where's it coming from? I mean, and then it gets to a point where it's natural. I mean, that's like a whole nother, that's next level. It's you've created real sounds in a real it's textural. I mean, like the soundscape is textural, if that makes sense. I mean, you feel it in your butt literally when you're sitting down, when something goes over. So
and there's other little diegetic moments of sound, right? Like there isn't music, but there's like a radio being played kind of near Ronto Roasters, and you could kind of hear, and it might even be what's playing in the bathroom, right?
Yeah.
Like they're broadcasting. So there's moments, there's music. I mean, there's Hondos in ads in the bathrooms, which honestly like took me like into the moment, like what is it? Who's the character, the crying girl in the bathrooms in Harry Potter? I can't remember the name of that character.
Moaning Myrtle.
Yeah, Moaning Myrtle. Who's in? I guess she's in both bathrooms, maybe in the men's and women's rooms in Harry Potter, at least at Universal Hollywood. Which I actually found super disturbing. It was like there's this moaning character in the men's bathroom. I'm like, this feels weird and wrong, and also I don't want to hear that sound while I'm trying to go to the bathroom. But then in over in the refreshers, over in the marketplace, there's just it just sounds like someone's got music on, and there are ads dropping in, and that diegetic sound thing is happening, and it maintains the consistency. I mean, I think the thing where I really noticed the lack of the unified music was the fact that during the fireworks show music was not on. And that was so odd. That was like the oddest thing ever.
Yeah, but it sticks with the story. I think they said like the rebels or whatever term they used are celebrating. It fits with the story. They found a way to make it work, and if they pumped in that music, they couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, and it was just, I was just checking the chat. Like it's just kind of refreshing to have that break. Like I don't know what it's going to be like once the sheen of the new is off, and then I'm like using this flex pass to just like meet up with people and like run in and run out. Like, I assume there's going to become a point when, if it isn't a concerted effort to introduce someone, or if we aren't playing some elaborate LARP inside the marketplace, that at some point it will just become, the equivalent of New Orleans Square, right? Like, I love it here. This is great. but it's still, just part of the theme park. And if there'll be this kind of, this like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I don't want to be, in, Frontierland right now. So like, I'm going to go to Main Street and just like chill out and cycle down. If Galaxy's Edge itself will be kind of an escape from Disney proper while I'm there.
Yeah. The Tom Sawyer Island effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and I do love Tom Sawyer Island. Like, so it's still, I mean, one of the funnier things about this to me is, particularly as I was watching some like the theme park Twitter, which I don't follow closely, and so sort of the backlash reaction, and people with their sporks out, ready to both steal more sporks and try and stab it as it's coming to life, is in terms of the scale of the land. People complain like there's not enough for kids to do, and I'm like, kind of looking at like comparison to what? To like Tomorrowland? Yeah. Fantasyland? Yeah. But when you add up sort of the rest of the park and the individual lands, this is 2 major rides. I mean, yeah, there's no spinner ride for kids.
It's New Orleans Square.
Yeah, but it's New Orleans Square.
Yeah.
This
was Star Wars.
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of the recipe right now. That 2 major rides, one bigger, one slightly smaller, a restaurant. Like, it's Cars Land, it's Wizarding World, it's Avatar. All of them are kind of following that model right now. It's perfectly matched, if not slightly larger than a lot of the big headliner new worlds. The only exception I can think of is the leaked plans for the Nintendo World coming up, which look a lot bigger, and actually Universal in some areas is making it its own park.
Yeah, so is it going to be its own gate in Japan?
Or I think in Florida. It's going to be the Nintendo and one other property. I think they're calling it like Fantastic Worlds or something like that. I think it's going next to Wizarding World in Japan.
Okay.
But yeah, that seems like a slightly larger scale, but otherwise, every other like large, news-making theme park expansion has been on this same scale, what I can see.
Is there a future here for taking some of these kinds of elements and bringing them? And I'm specifically thinking about the cantina, right? So Kevin, sadly, you haven't gotten a chance to do the cantina yet, but actually, and let me start actually with like what my one actual major complaint about what they're doing from an operational standpoint was that at least while we were there in those first couple of days of everything being wide open, they've got you limited to 45 minutes in the cantina, which I understand it's popular and they want to please everybody and show folks through. And they have a 2-drink maximum. And on the menu, it says 2 alcoholic drinks. But the way they're enforcing it is 2 drinks, period, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. So, Anthony and I, we got the jet juice and fuzzy tauntauns. Although we did definitely made the mistake of like, we should have gotten like 4 different things. Yeah. Or at least 2 jet juices and 2 other things, right? It's probably what I would do again, because the jet juice was good and
pretty good,
did the job. But then it was like, oh yeah, you're cut off. Like no blue milk, no, just like, sip on this carbonated thing and like bring yourself down. So 2 drinks in 45 minutes. And, I don't have a massive tolerance for alcohol. So I got drunk fast. And then they shove you out the door. And that feels like a formula for disaster in the long run. But then just being in that spot, I was like, I would go to this. Like they open this up out in the world, and people go to Scum and Villainy, which is a off-brand themed bar that tries to recreate the Mos Eisley Cantina over on Hollywood Boulevard. But like, I know in the past there was the there was the failed attempt to have, you know, the sort of Disney's version of Dave and Buster's, the name of which escapes me at the moment.
Disney Quest.
Disney Quest, yes. So Disney Quest, and 2 or 3 people just died of a heart attack by me comparing the two. But like that was, you know, like it was that era when it was like there's GameWorks and Dave and Buster's and all these sorts of things. And weirdly enough, it was Dave and Buster's that managed to like stand the test of time. I would have bet on GameWorks myself because I really loved it, but I'm more of a video game nerd than I am just like getting drunk with my bros kind of guy, which is what Dave and Buster's is for. And so they had Disney Quest, but you know, didn't pan out in the long run. And yet now something like Oga's, I'm just sitting here going like, gosh, you know, drop an Oga's and a Be Our Guest like somewhere in Chicago. And yeah, like I would be all over it. But I mean, can it kind of work the other way? And as this desire and as the parks kind of find themselves overloaded, is there any hope whatsoever of this stuff reaching beyond, or does it belong in these resort areas? You know, does it only really work when there's that little bit of FOMO, when it's not pedestrian?
I don't think it necessarily doesn't work. Like you said, people go to Scum and Villainy. The question is that specific experience. If they franchise it, does it then take away something? I mean, one of the first things I thought when I heard they were opening this was I get to go to a Star Wars cantina. So if it takes some of that sheen away from the rest of the park, that I don't know.
Yeah. Like it's different when it's something like Club 33, right? Where, you know, that's got its own mythology. And, you know, it's just a fancy restaurant, like, you know, hidden upstairs from the Blue Bayou. Right. But, you know, a Star Wars cantina is a Star Wars cantina. And the demand was long there. And when Scum and Villainy opened, it was, at least allegedly, never intended to be a standing affair, right? It was a temporary takeover that was probably, obviously, like they were hopeful, you know, but it lasted a while. Oh, here we go. I'm poking my nose back in the chat right now. So Seg has dropped in Nintendo Land, Osaka, Japan first. Leaked photos of the model of the Japan location of Nintendo. That's over there in the office hours section of the NoPro Slack, for those of you who have access to that. Although, yeah, I saw this yesterday and like I see the model, but like I can't make heads or tails of what's actually going on here. It's like, well, it's multi-level and it looks like a lot of Legos. And there's like a mushroom house and some stuff and Mario Karts and Bowser's Castle that looks a lot like What If Castle Grayskull had Bowser's face. But it definitely, I don't know, it's odd to me. It's deeply, deeply odd to me. I can't really tell what it is they're making or going for here. It feels like maybe there's a bunch of dark rides, and weirdly enough, because of the way whatever they're using the models, it looks more like Minecraft Land than Nintendo Land to me.
I can also picture that getting scaled up and just being a ton of plastic and cement. So that's all going to depend on execution.
Yeah. Yoshi Island Dark Ride. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can see. I mean, if you're riding Yoshis, but will he swallow things and spit them out? That's the thing that matters. You know, how many eggs are going to get involved here? You know, particularly when like you want like a Mario Land bounce house is what you really want, right? You just want to be able to jump around and hit bricks, stomp on Goombas, like. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've been mildly skeptical of the Nintendo Land idea for a while because I just kind of don't know. I don't know what you would do other than go on like a video screen dark ride that just like showed you things from video games. It's like, okay. Catherine says, I want Luigi's Mansion with all the ghosts. That would be cool. You get strapped in with a vacuum and have to run around and capture digital ghosts. That'd be kind of cool.
I was more skeptical before Galaxy's Edge opened. Because up until Galaxy's Edge, the interactivity on the rides has always just been shooters. Mostly the Toy Story rides, but there's a whole bunch of, ones elsewhere where the idea is just to shoot lasers. There's Ant-Man in Hong Kong. There's all these examples, but that was always the interactivity. I think there's Monsters Inc. with flashlights is the only other thing I could think of. But this ride proved that there is a way to get that video game kind of feel, that interactivity, and integrate it with a theme park ride in a much more effective way, for the most part, depending on what role you get assigned. That made me a little bit more optimistic that with the right execution, Nintendo Land could pull it off better than I would have originally thought.
So let's do the roll call on Smuggler's Run, because we've actually haven't touched on it like at all. Kevin, what role did you get to play?
So I did both sides, pilot, and then gunner one time.
Nice. And Anthony?
I got right side pilot and initially right side engineer. So,
Brian?
I did all three. I was the left pilot, and then engineer and gunner.
Nice. Yeah, I've done engineering gunner and both pilots too. So, I was maybe like most worried because I knew there was a while there they were trying to like. I remember there was talk about how they were trying to tie how you did on the ride to how the world reacted to you, and like really make that affect your experience. And it feels like they're rolling out some of that, but maybe not in an extreme way yet, or not in an intense way. And
so it does happen with the app, because you are rewarded credits based on how well you do, and those do show up if it's working right.
Yeah. But then like the credits aren't.
Then you can't do anything.
Yeah, you can't do anything, right? So it's like one of those like you've got points, like yay, points.
There's the exit hallway, which changes depending on how you do. For Smuggler's Run, as you're leaving, if you do a really bad job, the walls are all torn apart and there's sparks flying out of the wall and everything like that. And if you do well, it's all pristine and clean, and you did a great job. The ship's in good shape.
Man, this feels like it's encouraging me to mess things up.
Yeah, so now we're gonna go again and just crash on purpose, because ours were pristine, right? When we walked out, they're like really nice walls.
Yeah, I mean, like I have yet to be on a run where it feels like things are really messed up. Like we were always in the positive credits, always get at least one of the coaxioms. Even we had a 5-year-old piloting at one point, and we still did okay. And then we got shoved back in with him, and like we talked him into being a gunner so we could pilot, because it was your birthday. And then like we were this again, no video. We were
this close.
Yes, thank you. This close to getting the second coaxium, but like he just would not push the shooty button. His dad pushed the shooty button, but he did push the shooty button the right time. And I was I was frustrated. I was like, we're so close. But it is sort of funny. Like it's almost like they reward you with aesthetic, and they reward you with like narrative juice for messing things up. Like nothing, there seemed to be no reaction coming back if you did a good run. It's only if you've done a bad run does the ride.
But they don't allow you to get too bad, from what I've read. I mean, there's always some success in the ride. They didn't want people to just purely fail, at least from what I've read.
So Nick, in the chat, Nick, who of course is one of the people behind if not the person really behind the kit bashing of the data pads, which has made its rounds. He's in the chat right now. Said, word on the street, this is about Nintendo Land. Word on the street is that most, if not all, the interactivity has been cut from Nintendo Land. God, I hope not. And I've had shopkeepers mention how badly I did on the Falcon, and to watch my back. You have to try really hard to get negative points, but there is a bankruptcy achievement. So gentlemen, that means we're going to go in and, well, that's the thing. It's like, you know, yeah, like if you just sat back and did nothing, would it would it just like kind of coast for you, right? Like I mean, I was impressed that even at the engineering station, it felt like, it had a nice balance of things to do versus being able to watch what's going on the screen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
Gunner.
we actually, we felt important. Like I had the sense going in, my brain was like, okay, well, you just put the kids at the guns and like, we flip the engineer switches, but it's that we're just flipping switches and the people who get to fly are the people who are really doing work. But we were doing work back there, and that's really nice inclusion in the ride that that everybody had something to do. So you just like no one's left out of the game.
Well, and I love the fact like suddenly like, wind's blowing in your face. Like you like panels feel like they're blowing out, and you're like, whoa, what's going on right now? And I definitely had more fun as an engineer than I did as a gunner. But
I agree with that.
Yeah,
the gunner's not particularly fun, especially like you watch the movies. Like the Falcon is like, it's such a cool gunner seat, and there's none of that in the ride.
Yeah. Yeah, when they first said they were doing the gunner, I was like, are they gonna let you go down the gun? Well, like, how does this work? And then it's like, no, you push some buttons in the middle seat, and you're like, okay. And there is, I guess, the automatic mode, so you just like to hold the button down and it's fine. Like it is kind of weird, like just like the balance of attention, it's definitely got there's a strange dynamic there, but more interesting, I feel, is so far, at least, my experience of being in with randos has been, there's been this kind of a little bit of back and forth camaraderie, right? Like you are playing together, even when it's not your group as a whole. There's a little bit of that. Like, did you guys also have like, were you in there with just a full friend set, or were you in there with like randos as well?
I was there with randos. I didn't feel it as much because when I had pilot, my dad had the other seat, so it was kind of like, I think your pilots are like kind of on the same wavelength. It changes a little bit, and then when I was in one of the gunner seats, I think it was like a pair of sisters that had the pilots. So I didn't have as much of that dynamic, but there's definitely like there's kind of a vibe like as you get going. I think that shows up.
Yeah, the first time I went with a group of people that I was familiar with, and then after that I was going through the single rider line, and was just with complete randos, but every time was the engineer because you're always the last one stuck on.
That feels like a curse.
Oh, no.
Single rider is automatically the engineer. Womp womp. Talk to me about your guys's first moment past just after getting your assignment, though. Like, you know what I mean? Like after you've been assigned your role.
Like once you like walk into like the main deck of the Falcon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like it's like a very eloquent way to describe that, but that's kind of what it is. It's just like, oh, this is the deck of the Falcon. Like it's wild.
Yeah. And it's the perfect way to do it, I think. I mean, because if you put that out anywhere fully accessible, you'd never be able to get to it. You put it as just part of the line, people kind of walk by, there's pressure to keep on moving. You put it in this little holding area where you have a brief but not insignificant time to just kind of wander around and explore without it being completely full of people. I think that was executed pretty well.
Yeah. For me, I didn't know that was going to be the last kind of and so just stepping in and realizing, right? I mean, I feel like for a lot of Star Wars Land, like it's been the moment before or the moment just of that's been the absolute magical, that moment of discovery of like, oh my God, we just stepped onto the Millennium Falcon and we're here. It's really here. And
I think you really get that walking into the cockpit too, just because that's like, it's such the way it's lit, like it's like, oh wow, okay.
Yeah. No, there's my current profile picture on Facebook is from that 10 minutes when we had nothing better to do but like take photos, and it's the movie lighting, like, or just even though, and that's actually one of the really cool things, like inside the line going into Smuggler's Run, like there's moments that there are gobos and other bits of lighting that just, you are in the Star Wars color palette, you're in the Star Wars lighting scheme, and it's that absolutely insane attention to detail that just constantly makes you feel like you're somewhere that you've always known existed but doesn't really exist.
Yeah, I think they learned. I think they learned a lot going back, even way back to doing Indiana Jones Adventure. I mean, you walk in Indiana Jones Adventure, it is lit like like Indiana Jones. It's lit right, and it feels real. And they brought a lot of that same kind of that thoughtful aesthetic to Star Wars Land, or to Galaxy's Edge. Especially, like you say, especially in the Millennium Falcon. I mean, like for me, walking in, it wasn't like the everybody's like, oh, got all the pictures with the Jar table, for me, it was turning around and looking. I think I mentioned Noah's, like they had the alcove. And he's like, the alcove. I'm like, it's like this one little storage center has been like the center of like in like almost every movie. It's like been something major has happened in that little point, and that's cool that they would even think to add that. I mean, like that could have been a blank wall. They could have just like rounded that corner off, but they put that side of the Millennium Falcon in there, and you can tell that there was a lot of love that was put into every corner of this land.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference to the experience overall, I think.
Well, and I'm also glad that, I mean, probably my favorite thing about the Hogwarts ride is the line. Like I'm not a big fan of spiders, so there's big chunks of that ride where I'm like, thank you, no. And but the line is ridiculous enough that like at the first opportunity I just went back in the line and ran around in it. And there's plenty of spots, particularly like the Defense Against Dark Arts classroom is an absolutely wonderful set piece, literally. But like, I have no great love of the projected Dumbledore, right? Like you're dealing with like the actors being projected against the screen, and it's like, okay, it's a screen. Like weirdly enough, like the Harry and Hermione, all them like showing up like in the Defense Against Dark Arts class, like that works a little bit better for me. But that just kind of like falls a little flat versus say the portraits gallery, which feels amazing, right? Like they've got the screens they're using for that are so high definition that it just feels they're doing something very, very right in that moment. And just the way that for Smuggler's Run, on the day of the cast and crew thing, I don't know if it's something they're pumping in there or was just left over, but it smelled of motor oil in the line. And that it's again, these like obscene almost details of we're going to get the scent right. We're going to get the sounds right. We're going to get all this stuff kind of going, the food's going to be weird, but delicious. Which probably in the long run is going to be, like I worry about the day when they're like, oh, we're not selling enough, Ronto wraps, so break out the corn dogs. And granted, I love Disney's corn dogs more than like any other corn dogs on earth, but like I don't want them. Like if I want corn dog, I'm going to go down to the cart in Main Street. That's where I'm going to get a corn dog. I want some weird food in Galaxy's Edge.
The place to watch, I think, in terms of what's going to happen there is Pandora, because they've got a very similar restaurant there, and very slowly a lot of the kind of unique elements have kind of chipped away from the menu there. It's still, much more unique than elsewhere. It's not just your standard burgers, but I think keeping the eye on that will tell us what's going to happen to the food at Docking Bay.
Yeah. Because there's a there's definitely a risk, like, if people won't try something. But the stuff that's there to try is actually, I mean, I don't know. I had the pork rib. Anthony, you had the
I had the
yak. What was it called?
Yip nip.
the nip nip. Yes, I had the fried fried nip. Yep. Yeah.
What was
It was
what
good.
was what was it? It was chicken. It was like a fried chicken. Like what?
It was like a fish battered fried chicken cube in mashed potatoes with was it wasabi peas?
Yeah,
and
right.
and green sauce, and like burrito green sauce. And it was just like it took me, like, I remember I was sitting there and I was just like trying to pick it apart, going like, what is this? This is so cool because it's familiar and it's weird and it's like I think, like, again, it's like the amount of thought that's been put into all this is like it's all familiar tastes, so it's nothing that's so out there that's like, people are gonna be like, like escargot at Disneyland, but it's but it's playful. I mean, like, it's playful and it messes with your mouth, and like there's texture, there's multiple tastes. I mean, like, you can tell. It's like I was just I was having fun with just the food. So I mean that might be another trip where we just do a taster's test one day.
Yeah,
buy everything on the menu.
Well, next time we're in the cantina, definitely have to, like, try and do a full flight, get a little bit of everything. All right. Well, we've been at this for a long time, and we're not sufficiently misaligned on our opinions that we're gonna like fight over something. So, is there anything? And it's also kind of hard because, like, it's not done yet. Right. And not even in the sense of like Disneyland is never finished, but will be remade for all time. It's just like literally there is a giant chunk of it isn't functioning yet. And we don't know what that is going to do, particularly because, there's almost no way it isn't going to somehow get integrated with the narrative that's going on, between the First Order and the Resistance. So probably means we have to like revisit when the ride is open.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys,
Yep.
I guess I'm gonna let you guys go unless anyone's got something that they wanted to kind of touch on. Nothing. Nobody. Anybody?
I can just tell you that, like, and Noah was there to witness it. I had a religious moment. I literally, like, if the Force, if I actually worship the Force, I would be suing Disney for, like, for religious appropriation, because I mean it's weird. It's like like when you want to go review a thing and you want to like be able to look at it as objectively as you can but still experience it. It'll be a while before I can actually objectively go through that land, because there are so many little things that beat my expectations. Like, I came in with really mediocre expectations. I mean, like it's Disney, so I know that they had this great pressure to do it right, and I've seen things that like knew that they were on the right path, but they just came in and they did things on another level. I mean, the one thing that will forever haunt me, and just like, and why I'm looking forward to what they're going to do with Rise of the Resistance, just scale. Just force of scale. Everything else in Disneyland is forced perspective, right? This isn't forced perspective. They built things 1-to-1. I mean, when you walk in to, so for people who haven't gone yet, when you walk into Hangar 7 to the restaurant, look up. I mean, literally look up. It's a hangar. I mean, they built something that, like, if starships were real, and there they are, you could put multiple starships in there, have room for them to rise up and go out a front door. When you put stuff on that level, when you put something on that level of scale, it is awe-inspiring. So the things that I'm going to go back later and look at will be operational. I mean, will have to be purely operational, because they got the aesthetic right. They clearly understand what they're doing with the immersion. So it's going to be, like, throughput. How do you handle it? I mean, handle the throughput? How do you handle, like making sure that everybody gets a moment? How do you make sure that, when it's 4th of July and it's packed and they've, they're doing that thing where, they're leading people through the back of, the back of the house.
Yeah.
How does that feel? I mean, that was honestly, I think that was my one nitpick the whole day, I think. Right.
Yeah, it was because it was a couple of, it was the first Tuesday of Totally Public Open. And when we went in line for the Millennium Falcon, it was a little bit raining. And instead of that open curve in front of the Falcon, they were passing us through the back. And they actually just taped down lines in the back. There were no stanchions or anything like that. It was really kind of funny. And there's a few crates back there that they've painted up, but we were back of house and we could actually, see the superstructure. And so they had done some like very like light theming back there. And that's what the overflow for the Falcon ride is. And I was sort of surprised to sort of see it that early on. But I think and I don't entirely know operationally like why they decided to make that choice on that day. But probably it would have been the alternative would have been spilling people out the front, which they just cannot do. So if the line gets too long, you got to break kayfabe and deal with the consequences there, which is okay. You can only have so much line space, right?
It wasn't the worst, but like it just, and for me, it's like when I look at places like New Orleans, like if you are in the overflow for
Pirates,
the overflow for Pirates is themed the whole way back. So like they open it, there's a door in the back, they open it up, you keep going back, back in the line, it's still themed, and it doesn't take you out the same way that this does. And for having the bathroom theme that it doesn't take you out when you do me in the overflow, and it's like you dump me out into like clearly backstage area, it's kind of like guys, your slipper's showing.
Yeah,
so
they can fix that with some tarps. Like it won't be hard.
It won't be hard to fix, but it's when you come out double barrel shotgun like that, and then to do that little drop, it's a little kind of like, guys, get going. So but I think they will. I think they're still learning and they're still shining up. So once it gets going, that baby will do light speed and in like 6 parsecs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and my hope is just that they don't treat it like it's finished. That even once Rise is open, that they're still keep on playing with it. So, all right, almost 9 o'clock. I'm gonna let you guys go have lives. Thank you as always for joining us on this ridiculous quest of ours. So,
happy Tuesday.
All right, gentlemen. Rising Moons and Till the Spire.
Later.
Rising Moons and Till the Spire, guys.
Later.